All right, guys, how we doing? I'm going to wait just a couple of minutes to see if we get a few more people show up.
Hi.
And then we'll get started. Just so you know, today we're going to do kind of a recap of what we did a few weeks ago when I was running way late, so that it makes a lot more sense, hopefully, because that's probably the single most important lesson in economics is understanding price theory. And so I want to make sure that it's something that you guys really have a good grasp on. I brought in a few extra tools today to make sure that I have what we need so that I can properly demonstrate for you guys. Drawing on the little screen definitely has its limitations, so I'm going to do some things a little bit differently today. And if we get to a point where you're like, I have no idea what he's talking about, I don't understand what you mean by that, you should have a little question dialog box. Just feel free to pop in a question and say, I don't get that. Can you go over that again? And that'll work out. All right? Cool. All right. Okay. So I'll wait just a minute here, see if we get anyone else coming in on this.
I'll be 10 minutes at 5. I'll be 10 minutes at 5.
Yeah, right. But you're a little bit over 5 years. So you're already 6. What did you do for free, Andrew? We played Blurt, and we roughhoused, and we started a game of Risk before I realized that I needed to come home for economics.
All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started, and if people show up, then more people show up, and if not, well, they can check their email and they can watch the video later on. So today I want to talk with you a little bit about price theory. And so just to recap, before we talked about barter economics, how people are willing to trade stuff for things that they want, the idea being that if I trade you something, it's because I want what you have more than I want what I have. And if you trade me for that, it's because you want what I have more than you want what you already have. And so we trade. And by trading, both of us are better off. And then last week we looked at money and the idea of how money acts as a tool to facilitate that trade. The idea that I don't have to find someone that wants what I have, I just have to find someone who's willing to accept some commodity or some money in exchange for what I'm willing to give them. And as long as I can do that, as long as I can find someone who's willing to give me what I want in exchange for money, then the money serves as a tool to help us facilitate that trade. It makes trade a little bit more smooth of a process. It helps to eliminate some of what we call the transaction cost of trading. So the question is, now we have to look at, if we know that money exists, now different items are going to have a price associated with them. So the question is, what is the price of anything, and where does the price come from? So we've got two forces that we're looking at here when we're trying to figure out where our price comes from. And the two forces that we have are the force of supply and demand. And I want to explain those two things really quickly, because these are two different groups of people here. And, sorry. Okay, good. So you have producers. Producers make stuff, and they make stuff with the intent to do what? With the intent to sell it or to trade it for something. The idea is I'm not producing stuff for myself. I'm producing things in order to trade them with other people. And so producers are the ones who are willing to supply goods and services to the market. So remember, anytime we talk about the supply curve or supply in general, we are talking about the producing side of the economy. But the producing side of the economy doesn't live in a vacuum, right? Producers make these products, make these services, do all this stuff with the intent to sell to another group of people. And this other group of people we're going to call consumers. And consumers demand goods, they demand services. And they're willing to pay a price in exchange to get these things. So it's not just that, hey, give me that, give me that. That's not what demand is. Demand says, if you produce something, I'm willing to give up stuff in order to get it. So I want to, real quickly, I want to share my screen with you, and I'm going to draw some stuff up here. All right, so the screen I'm going to share is my mighty web screen. There we go. I'm going to share the screen with you, and hopefully you can see it. Let me present to everyone. Okay. So now, oh, hey, Cass.
Hey, so something a little. All right, so we have a new person today. Ben,
Okay, cool.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good, good.
Good, good. All right, cool. Well, you guys are joining us right as I'm starting to talk a little bit about the law of supply, law of demand. And I know we kind of touched on this before, but let's be honest, we didn't do a very good job of it. Okay?
Oh, hey, Tom, by the way, I'm sorry I can't make class today. I have to go help my work prepare for their Halloween party.
Oh, okay, okay, that's fine.
I'll make sure to
That's
catch
fine.
from Miles.
Yeah, you've got video, so you can watch it later. All right? Cool. All right, well, thanks for checking in at least.
And it totally worked. Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, so if you guys want to talk about more like that or something.
All right. Well, you guys can always watch the video later on, or you guys can hang out and stay and watch the video. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. You should have a little dialog box on your screen, or if you click the question button, you should be able to ask questions there. Right? Cool.
Okay.
Okay, so I've got my blank screen up right here, and I'm going to draw some things on this screen for you that hopefully should help us understand supply and demand a little bit better. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an X and a Y axis. And on the X and Y axis, I'm going to label a few things here. Oops. So along our X-axis of this little chart, we're looking at something called quantity, right? And quantity is just what you think it is. Quantity is going to be the number of items that are produced, that are sold, that people want to sell. And then along my other axis over here, oops, I'm going to label this price. And the idea here is that people are willing to buy and sell different products at different prices, or even the same product in different quantities at different prices. So let's take a look at how that happens real quickly. So first of all, we're going to look at this from the supply side. So on the supply side, the idea is if I'm making stuff to sell and I can't sell at a very high price, what's my incentive? How many of these items am I going to produce? Well, there's not a very strong incentive for me to produce these things, so I'm not going to produce very many. So if my price on this item is relatively low, then the incentive to produce is relatively low as well. And so I end up with a point somewhere right in here. Oops, let's see if I can get a point there. There. All right. So I end up with a point as a supplier that says, the price is low, don't produce very many of these, right? Because the purpose of me producing is so that I can sell them to you. Well, what if the price were to go very, very high? And if the price is very, very high, now what's my incentive? My incentive is to produce a lot of these things, right? And so the quantity is very high as well. So now, if I line these two intersections up, now the incentive is to produce a lot of these at a very high price. Now, if I kind of extrapolate this out a little bit, you see what we call our supply curve right here. And how do I know that this is the supply curve? Well, the easiest way to remember that it's the supply curve is that it's going up, right? From left to right, it's moving up. The slope is slanted upward. And that's my supply curve. So we could look at this and let's say we're going to write the law of supply. Let me get a good marker for us here. Okay, so the law of supply. Oops. And the law of supply is going to state that as the price rises, quantity supplied what's it going to do? Quantity supplied
goes up.
Is going to go up as well, right?
Yep.
Okay, hold on. Oh, it didn't make me a new page. Shucks. Okay, so as the price goes up, quantity supplied is going to go up as well. Okay. Now, notice that I didn't say as the price goes up, supply goes up. I said quantity supplied goes up. So again, let's redraw our little chart here. And I'm not going to label these axes because you can get the general idea just from looking at it. But as at a lower price, there's my quantity, right? And as the price goes up, the quantity supplied is going to go up. And as the price continues to go up, the quantity supplied is going to continue to increase until you see this big giant curve. Okay. Remember that the independent variable here is the price. Okay. There are a lot of other things that are going to shift the supply curve, but anytime you hear me say the word supply, I'm talking about the entirety of this curve. Okay. But if you hear me say quantity supplied, I'm not talking about the entirety of the curve. I'm talking about an individual point on that curve that coincides with an individual point along the quantity axis, along the x-axis. Okay, so be careful. That's the difference between supply and quantity supplied. Okay, so let's revisit this. The law of supply, as the price goes up, the quantity supplied is also going to go up. And who's doing supplying? Producers or consumers?
Producers.
Yep.
Producers. Producers are the ones doing the supplying. Fantastic. Okay, so now let's look at the other side of the equation here. So for this, let's draw our axis again. Again, we're also looking at quantity, and you'll forgive my sloppy handwriting. I'm using a pretty
Black.
poor stylus here.
We can't see it.
You can't see anything? What are you looking at? You just see black?
See a black screen and it says live in the corner.
Okay, hold on. Can you see my screen right now?
No.
It just shows black.
Black.
Just black.
Yep.
Sharing, presenting, it should say, oh goodness. Well, that drives me crazy. Let me do something real quick here. Let me stop screen sharing. Okay, can you see a picture of me right now?
No.
You don't see me at all.
No.
Oh goodness. Okay. Let's look. Okay, that's really weird because it's showing me on the, when I click on the YouTube link, I can actually watch what I'm doing on the YouTube link and it's showing up just fine. So it might be just in this chat here. What you guys might want to do is just go to the link, the Google Plus event or the YouTube link. That's really weird. I'm kind of surprised that you can't see what I'm doing.
Okay.
All right, so, well,
You could see it at first, and then it just like switched to black.
probably when I started broadcasting my screen, right?
Like you could see when you were drawing the graph, and then it switched.
Okay, so let me try this again.
Okay.
Let me go back to Mighty Web, share that with you guys. So can you see my screen at all, or you just see black?
Now I see your Google Plus profile picture, and then whenever you say something, like it makes sound waves.
Oh goodness, this is fantastic. Okay, not cool.
Are we doing video call?
Yeah, video call.
Yeah. Maybe he stopped on video call.
Yeah. We were doing a video call until, I don't know if it's working actually. All right. Well, it is working on the recording, and I know that it's working on the recording because I can watch the recording right here. So if you go to the Canvas page and in the assignment, you can see the GMA Economics for Everybody Price Theory Part 1 link as an announcement. And you can watch the video there, live stream it, and it's actually showing my screen correctly. So it's going to be really funny because you could actually be on the screen, on the GMA screen, watching me showing you the GMA or the Google event screen. It would be like this kind of weird Google Hangout inception thing. But this is what I really want to show you guys right now is the price theory. Okay, well let me do this. Let's look at the demand curve. You guys seem to be able to get that the supply curve down, whether you were able to see it or not. So let's at least take a look at the demand curve. And I got a phone call. Hold on a second, real quickly.
Seems to make sense enough so far. Yeah, I think I'd make more things like more whatever there are. They're giving me tons of money. Seems good. How many classes do you take here?
Let's see. 7.
7. That's a lot. Yeah, so it's a good place then.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. All right, so let's go ahead and let's continue looking at our demand curve right now. So now, the same way that it's suppliers who are going to be, it's producers that are supplying goods and services. Now we're looking at consumers as the ones who are demanding goods and services. So let's think of a product that really accurately displays this. And the first one that comes to my mind, okay, it's not the first one that comes to my mind, but it's a good example, are tacos from Del Taco. Do you guys even have Del Taco up there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do? Okay. Do they have Taco Tuesday?
Yeah.
You guys familiar with Taco Tuesday? And I don't mean Lego Movie Taco Tuesday. Del Taco, Taco Tuesday. Here we're looking at, it's like 3 soft tacos for 99 cents.
Yeah, it's right by my house.
Fantastic. Okay. So when you get, you just go down there to Del Taco, you want to buy tacos. On any given day, a regular Del Taco a regular soft taco at Del Taco, I think is like 79 cents. Okay. So it's not like it's a super high price. So let's just say it's a reasonable price. Well, how many tacos do I want to buy at this reasonable price? Maybe a couple, 2 or 3, right? So I'm going to buy a few tacos, and that's going to be at this price, at a price of 79 cents, my quantity demanded is going to be 2, maybe 3 tacos, right?
Yep.
But when Taco Tuesday comes around and the price is significantly lower, so now the price is down about 33 cents per taco. How many tacos am I packing down?
Probably gonna buy like
10 to 15.
9.
That's how you know you're talking a bunch of teenage boys. Right?
Taco
Maybe
party.
not 10 or 15, but it was a pretty common thing for me as a starving college student. Taco Tuesday, I would go buy 6 tacos, right? So then now the quantity demanded is going to be significantly greater at a lower price. And the same thing here on my demand curve, if I connect the points and kind of extrapolate that out, you see that this is your demand curve. And how do I remember that this is my demand curve? Well, because it starts with a D, and D goes down for demand curve, right? So it's an easy way to remember. So let's take a look at what is the law of demand. Remember, the law of supply says that as prices rise, quantity supplied is going to rise. So the law of demand is going to say, as the price goes up, the quantity demanded is going to do what?
Go up.
Well, hold on. As the price goes up, let's look back. As the price goes up, oh, you guys can't even see the dumb chart. If the price is going up, if it gets more and more and more expensive, I'm actually going to demand less and less and less. So our law of demand says, go ahead.
I'm not talking about the 79-cent tacos being less because the 99-cent taco is more, right? So.
Well, but the 99-cent tacos, I get 3 tacos for 99 cents.
Okay, I thought we were talking about something else. Never mind.
Okay. No, if I get 99-cent tacos, I'm getting 3 tacos for 99 cents, whereas on a regular day, I'm only getting 1 taco for 79 cents. So even though the total cost might go up, the marginal cost per taco goes down. And when it comes to economics, your decisions are going to be made on the margin all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to say, oh, yes, of course, I want 3 more tacos. You might say, but before, where I was buying 3 tacos for 79 cents a piece, I ended up spending like $2.50, and here I can get 6 tacos for $2 plus tax. So the total quantity of tacos goes up, and the total price of tacos goes down. So what if happens is the price of tacos goes up? Well, then your quantity demanded, in this case, is going to go down. If tacos get more expensive, you're going to start buying less and less and less tacos. Okay. Now, all of these things, or both of these things, are assuming that price is the only thing that's changing here, when the reality is price is rarely the only thing that's changing. So when we look at the law of demand and we look at the law of supply, we have to throw in this caveat called ceteris paribus. And ceteris paribus means all things remaining equal. So if everything else stays the same, but the price goes up, then your quantity demanded is going to go down. Okay, so I want to show you guys something here real quickly. I'm going to draw a supply and demand chart, which you guys won't even be able to see unless you watch the video later on. I'm going to draw 2 curves. One is going to be the supply curve, and one is going to be the demand curve. First, my X and Y axis, I'm going to label those, and I'm just going to, for the sake of efficiency, put a Q and a P, a Q standing for quantity and P standing for price. The quantity is along my X-axis, P goes along my Y-axis, up and down. And so now I'm going to draw the demand curve. And remember, the demand curve is going to slope downward from left to right. So if I draw my demand curve, it's going to look something like this. And now I'm also going to include my supply curve, because these things do not exist in a vacuum. Remember, the whole point of looking at supply and demand is because we're trying to figure out how producers and consumers agree upon a price at which they're willing to exchange products for money. Okay, so we can't just look at the demand side, the consumer side. We also have to look at the supply side. And the supply side is looking at producers. Supply says, at what price points are producers willing to produce and sell in various quantities? And the supply curve says at what various price points are consumers willing to demand and buy and use these products at various quantities. So these 2 curves almost always intersect. Now, sometimes they don't intersect. Sometimes people are not demanding the things that you want to sell. So say, for example, you had the stomach flu.
Nick Taylor, please dial
Oh,
0.
yay,
Nick
announcements.
Taylor, please dial 0.
But let's say you had the stomach flu, and like everyone at my house does right now. And so you had an overabundance of stomach contents, of vomit, okay? And you wanted to sell this vomit. Is anyone buying what you're selling? Probably not, okay? So there's no demand for that product, which means that supply and demand in that instance never intersect. But I can pretty much draw a supply and demand curve for every single product, item, thing out there. Anything that is scarce and needs to be exchanged has a supply and demand curve that can be drawn for it, okay? So where we have our demand curve and where we have our supply curve, there is a point at which the 2 intersect. And the point at which those 2 intersect, we are going to call our equilibrium point. Now, be careful when you use the term equilibrium. Equilibrium makes you think that everything is in balance, right? That everything is as it should be and it's balanced out and everything's perfect. And that's not true at all, okay? All equilibrium means, and let me erase this real quickly. All equilibrium means is that at a certain price, oops, let me draw that again. At a certain price, the quantity demanded is going to equal the quantity supplied. That's all equilibrium means. That quantity demanded equals quantity supplied at a specific price. And we sometimes draw that out like this. Okay, so how do we know in the real world that quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied? Do I have to draw a chart? Do I have to draw a graph or anything like that? Do I have to do some kind of crazy complex mathematical function? No, not at all. There's actually a very easy way to know if quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied at any given price. And the easiest way to know that is, did a transaction take place? Well, here's an example. I don't know if you guys can see me. I've got my favorite teaching tool, my Polar Pup, my 44-ounce Dr. Pepper with ice from Circle K convenience store down here in Chandler. And I went into the store. I went into the Circle K convenience store, and I purchased that that soda pop. And they had it offered for sale for a price of 79 cents. And I said, sure, I value one of those at 79 cents. And so at a quantity of one and a price of 79 cents, my supply curve and their demand, or my demand curve and their supply curve intersected at that point, and a transaction took place. Okay. And that's how you know that supply equals demand for at least that one consumer and that one producer. Now, there's a lot more that we can derive from this. We can look at effects in supply and demand. We can look at things that change the slope of the demand curve. We can look at artificial price ceilings and price floors. So I want to take a look at a couple of those things right now. First of all, I just want to show you guys things that shift supply. Okay, so I'm going to go back to broadcasting my screen right here. And I'm going to add a new window. Again, I'm going to start with my basic supply curve. Start labeling my axes with the P and the Q for price and quantity. Since I'm drawing a supply curve here, which direction is it going to slope? Up. Thank you. It's going to slope upward. There's my supply curve. Fantastic. Now I just kind of got a generic supply curve here. And let's come up with a product. Let's say I'm making basketballs. All right. Sounds like a good product. And this is a big assumption, but let's say this is my supply curve for making and selling basketballs. And there's a lot of things that can have an impact on where the curve falls, what the relationship is between the price and the quantity. And some of those things I want to talk to you about are like the availability of input resources. So what if leather all of a sudden got really expensive? Right? I mean, what's basketball? Basketballs are generally nowadays they're made out of like a fake leather, and before that they were made out of a kind of a cattle leather that had been printed with a it had been printed with this pigskin texture. Before that, they'd been made out of pigskin, but then football wanted to claim. Anyway, basketballs made out of leather, right? Let's just make that assumption.
It would cost more to make, right? And you'd have to pay more for it, right?
What's that?
It costs more to make, and you'd have to pay more to make it.
Yeah, if there's less leather around, it's going to cost me more to buy the leather that I need to make it. And that means that the cost for each individual item is going to go up for me, the producer. Well, let's take a look at this real quickly. Whereas before, at this price, I was able to, where it intersects right here, I was able to produce this quantity. If I spend that same amount of money, am I able to manufacture and sell as many basketballs? Well, no, because the cost for me to manufacture them has gone up. So where previously my quantity supplied intersected right there, now it might intersect somewhere down in this area. Okay. And even if I can sell, even if I were to spend significantly more money, or even if it was at a higher price, the idea here is that because the cost of each input is higher, I'm actually not able to produce as many or willing to produce as many and sell them at every single price point. And I'm able to redraw my supply curve, but it's shifted slightly to the left. Okay? And that's an important thing. I want you guys to understand that real quickly, is that supply, we say supply has gone down, but graphically the supply curve is shifting to the left. Because yes, it's moving down, but it's moving down not up and down, it's moving down along your x and along your x-axis, right? Now, coordinating points are going to shift, where now at this price point I can only produce this quantity, and at this price point I can only produce this quantity, but the entire line itself shifts along the x-axis. It doesn't shift up and down the way we think up and down. It's shifting up and down along this x-axis. Okay, that's the x-axis. Oops. Okay, so what are some things that you guys can think of that might make supply shift, like the entire supply curve shift, either up or down?
The quality.
Okay, a lot of times the quality, because the quality of a good is usually going to be more costly to produce. Absolutely, that can cause the supply curve to shift. Or if we change the quality, what else? What about changes in technology, in manufacturing processes? Can those have an impact on the entirety of the supply curve?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. What about things like international trade policies? For example, if I import petroleum, raw petroleum from Canada, and all of a sudden Canada says, well, we're going to charge a huge tariff on oil exports to the United States. Does that have a change in supply? Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, it's absolutely going to cause a change in supply. Now, in a dynamic market, in one that's able to adjust with supply and demand simultaneously, that's not really that big of a problem. Okay, that's a kind of a natural market force. And the natural market signals send messages to people. Okay. And those messages are a response to supply and demand. Right? Really, prices of products that you go to the store and buy are information. And there's tons of information wrapped up into the price. So here's a quick example. So some of you guys might know, in addition to being a school teacher, let me stop this. I don't know if you guys can see me again, but here's my face. So in addition to being a school teacher, I also operate a mobile shave ice vending company called the Icebox. And I make my own special blocks of ice to fit in my ice shaver. And the reason I have to do that is, one, because I have to get them the right size to fit in my machine, but two, also because I want to use really, really good, clean, purified, filtered water to make my ice. And I went to fill up my water jugs that I use to make my ice. And normally I can get this purified, filtered water for 25 cents a gallon or 5 gallons for $1. Okay, that's pretty standard going rate for water, and it has been for a few years. Well, for the first time in a very, very long time, when I went to fill up those water jugs, water got more expensive. The price of water actually went up. Okay. And so as I'm going, and I went to go get this water, and the water actually got more expensive. What do you think I did? As a consumer, if the price of water goes up, what do you think I would do?
You bought less.
Yeah, exactly. I respond by buying less water. Well, what does that mean for other people who really need water? It means that there's more water available for other people who really, really need the water and might be willing to pay a higher price. Okay, so there's two things. Not only does the price signal to me that the relative scarcity of water is getting to be greater, or relative demand of water is getting to be greater, but it lets me know that there's people out there who want the water more than I do. Let me show you what I mean using my charts again. All right. So again, I'm drawing a basic supply and demand curve here that I don't know if you guys can even see yet. So there's price and there's quantity along the x-axis. I'm going to choose two different colors, and there's my demand curve because it's sloping down, and here's my supply curve because it's sloping upward. That's how I keep this in mind. Okay. So there's a lot of things that could have shifted to make the price of water go up. And since I'm not exactly sure what it was, all I can do is say, well, let's have a look. This is the old price for water. And all I know is now the price of water has gone up. So that tells me two things. Either the supply of available water has gone down, or the demand for purified water has gone up. And really, it doesn't matter. I don't have to know which one of those two things is driving the price of water. But let me just say, for example, that demand for purified water is going up. So what am I going to see when I look at the demand for purified water is that the demand curve has actually shifted along the x-axis. Remember, it doesn't go up in terms of like gravity-wise away from the earth. It goes up, meaning it's shifted to the right along the x-axis. And so now where it used to intersect with supply, now it intersects somewhere else. And not only does this tell me, oh yeah, that the price has risen, but it's also a signal to the suppliers of water to produce more of it. So what do you think happens when now we get this signal? There's more demand for water, and you get the signal to the suppliers. Well, the price of water has gone up. We should start producing more of it. What do you think the suppliers start to do?
Produce more of it?
They're going to start producing more. Okay? And when they just generally produce more of it, you're going to see the same thing that you saw, the demand curve. Now your supply curve is going to shift over to the right a little bit. And now you've got to remember this was line 1, and that's line 2, and this was line 1, and that's line 2. And now where your supply curve, your secondary supply curve, and your secondary demand curve intersect, well, now you're looking at your new equilibrium point. And what you end up seeing is that over time, the price is able to stabilize itself and the quantity is able to increase, all relative to supply and demand, these two market forces of supply and demand. Okay. So we have these two natural market forces, and when they work, when we let them go, and they're able to act as a means of communication between producers and consumers, then I don't need to know all these crazy things about the supply curve or the demand curve. All I need to know is I need to look at the price. And the price should tell me everything that I need to know about that product, and whether or not the price is higher today than it was yesterday, and whether or not it's going to be higher tomorrow. Okay. Now understand that these charts that I'm drawing here, these are what we call static graphs, and static means that they're not moving. I can come up with scenarios to try and predict what the impact of a shift in supply or a shift in demand is going to be, but these are static graphs, meaning they don't accurately portray what's going on in the real world. Now, some of you may have had a science class before, and you know that when it comes to scientific method, your whole goal is to have, well, in the actual process of conducting research, is you have to have two different research subjects. One is going to be the control, and one is going to be the variable. And there should only be one thing different between those two subjects. Okay? Well, when it comes to looking at social sciences, it's really, really hard to stop the world and shift prices just a tiny bit and see what happens. Okay? We can't freeze the rest of the world. And when we do shift prices just a tiny bit, are there other things that change? Absolutely. Do people change their preferences, or does the sky turn gray and rain? Of course, because the world that we live in is not static. The world that we live in is what we call dynamic. It's shifting. There's tons of stuff moving all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time. Okay. So while our traditional supply and demand curve might look like this, oops, okay, our traditional supply and demand curve might look like this. That's only a model that represents a static world. And so the idea that we have one specific equilibrium point where all the world's problems are solved is totally, totally bogus. This is a model that's used for analyzing logical changes in supply, in demand, in quantity supplied, in quantity demanded, analyzing prices. This is simply an analytical tool. Okay? Because what you'll see on a regular basis is, even though the price of a single item in the grocery store might not change every day, the actual point of equilibrium is very, very dynamic and actually looks a little more something like this. Because even though the price itself doesn't change, people's preferences are changing all the time. Where today I might want to buy a ton of tacos because it's Taco Tuesday. The next day I don't want to buy a ton of tacos. In that case, the price changed. Maybe the following day, I still want to buy a ton of tacos, even though the price is the same. What's changed? Well, maybe I got more available resources. Maybe mom gave me more lunch money, and so I've got resources that I can use. Okay, so the idea here is that the supply and demand graphs that we're looking at are good analytical tools, but they're not the be-all, end-all of economic analysis. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But this is kind of the basics of economic analysis is, okay, well, how does that change affect the supply curve? How does that change affect the demand curve? And what's that going to do to prices overall? So I'm going to give you guys a scenario real quick. And if you have a piece of scrap paper, try and draw it out. Don't worry about getting paper out if you don't have one out. Or if there's a whiteboard handy, because it looks like you guys are at the school. If there's a whiteboard handy, grab one and see if you can draw a supply and demand curve real quick. And I'm not sure if you can see my chart. Maybe if you have the YouTube window open in another screen, you'll be able to see it. But I'm going to give you guys a scenario real quick. Okay. So here's my basic XY axis, and I'm going to label them with price and quantity. And now I'm going to draw my downward sloping demand curve, and I'm going to draw my upward sloping supply curve. And notice I can draw these out of nothing, right? I don't have to have all the information. I don't have to know everything about every piece of this puzzle. All I have to know is this is the supply curve and this is the demand curve. And I'm pretty sure I know no matter what the slope or where they're at, I don't have to have numbers on my x-axis or my y-axis. That's irrelevant, because all I'm trying to do here is see, is the price going to go up, and is the quantity supplied going to go up, or the quantity demanded going to go up? Okay. So let's take a look at a few things really quickly. Think of a product that you guys would want to buy.
Food.
Okay, so let's look at food. Specifically, let's look at corn. All right, because corn is a really easy one to use. And I'm talking like corn on the cob, still out in the field, okay? So here's our supply and our demand curve for corn. Here is what we've identified to be our equilibrium price. So this is the price at which quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. All right, so this is our little chart here. What if researchers or scientists found a new use for corn? They could take corn and they could turn it into some kind of biofuel and run cars on it. Now, I mean, I know that's a real thing, but let's just imagine that scenario happens, and all of a sudden, corn is not just being demanded by the people who want to eat it, but now corn has another use. It can also be used to produce fuel. What do you think is going to happen to our supply and demand curve?
Supply is going to go up, demand, so supply will go up too.
Okay, what's the initial response is what? The initial response is our demand curve is going to shift, okay? Our demand curve is going to shift to the right, meaning it's going to go up. And that is going to have what kind of an impact on the price of corn?
It's going to go up.
The price of corn is going to go up, okay? And that fact that the price of corn goes up, that's also a signal to the corn producers that they're going to produce, or that they should produce at least, a greater quantity of corn, right? But what if they can't produce any more corn? What if they're already producing as much as they possibly can?
Put the price up?
the price is going to go up even more because we're at a fixed quantity. And so the price actually goes up even more than it would have if it were allowed to, if the quantity supplied was allowed to fluctuate along with it. So in this scenario, an increase in demand increased the quantity. If supply is able to shift, then that's fantastic. If it's not, then the price goes up even more than it otherwise would. Okay. And so having this little framework to use to understand supply and demand makes it easier for you to understand what different economic policies are going to do within the environment, within the economy. Okay. So before we get too crazy ahead of ourselves, because we've only got about 5 minutes left, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some information, some assignments up on the Canvas page. Excuse me. And I want you guys to take a look at some of these assignments on the Canvas page. They're not up there right now, but they should be up there probably by tomorrow afternoon about this same time. So take a look on Wednesday afternoon and see if the assignments are up there. But they're going to help you practice not only drawing supply and demand curves, but being able to analyze what the various shifts in supply and demand are and how they're going to have an impact on the economy at large. Okay. Next week, what I want to do is we're going to take a look specifically at the slope of the demand curve, what that means, what we call elasticity of demand, and what that means. But I also want to look at a phenomenon called price ceilings and price floors. And while most often those are policies that are enacted by the government, that's not always the case. Okay, so we'll look at that a little bit, and hopefully you'll be able to get a really solid understanding of how prices work. Okay, so do you guys have any questions before we shut off real quick?
No.
All right, is this stuff that you've heard before?
Not yet.
Okay, that's all right. You guys seem to get a pretty good grasp on it. Just make sure that you check tomorrow on the Canvas page for the exercises, for the assignments. There's going to be a few short videos and some reading assignments. And, you know, kind of work on them at your own pace, but it'll really help if you have them all finished by next Tuesday, by class period next Tuesday, so that when we start looking at price ceilings and price floors and elasticity of demand, those things will be very easy for you to understand. All right? Any questions, guys?
No, we're good.
All right, cool. Then I'll check you guys out next week, all right?
All right, thanks, Tom.
All right, remember, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me during the week, email, text message, whatever. All right? Cool. Later.